The smell of overcooked turkey and fake gratitude hung in the air like a bad cologne when I walked into Janet's house that Thursday morning. Thanksgiving at the in-laws, my personal version of hell, complete with passive-aggressive side dishes and a mother-in-law who treated me like hired help. I'm Miles Grafton, 40 years old, logistics coordinator at Midwest Distribution. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps my wife Jade and her designer knockoffs. After 15 years of marriage, I'd learned to navigate these family gatherings like a minefield, smile, nod, and drink enough beer to make Janet's commentary bearable. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Miles, you're early, Janet called from the living room, her voice dripping with that special brand of disappointment she reserved just for me. Jade's still getting ready upstairs. Of course she was. Jade could spend 3 hours getting ready to take out the trash. I mumbled something about helping in the kitchen and headed toward the back of the house, hoping to grab a beer and find a quiet corner to hide in until dinner. That's when I heard it. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see Jade standing by the sink with her mother. They were whispering, heads close together like conspirators planning a heist. Something about their posture made me stop in my tracks. "I'm pregnant, Mom, with Conrad's baby." The words hit me like a freight train. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they'd hear it. "Are you certain it's his?" Janet's voice was barely audible. "Positive. We've been careful about timing." Jade's voice had that cold, calculating tone I'd been hearing more often lately. "Conrad can provide so much more for this baby than Miles ever could. The dental practice is booming, and he's opening that second location next month." Conrad Miller. Jade's boss at the dental clinic where she worked as a receptionist. 40-something, divorced, drove a BMW, and wore suits that cost more than my monthly salary. I'd met him at a few office parties, the kind of guy who talked loudly about his success and made sure everyone knew he'd gone to an expensive college. "What about Miles?" Janet asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't particularly concerned about my feelings. "He'll get over it. He always does." Jade laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Besides, the prenup protects most of his assets anyway. I'll be fine." The prenup. The document her lawyer had insisted on before our wedding, claiming it would protect both parties. I'd been too in love and too stupid to read the fine print carefully. "Conrad promised me the condo downtown," Jade continued. "You know, the one in the Harbor View complex? 3 bedrooms, granite countertops, view of the lake. Much better than that cramped house Miles insists on keeping." That cramped house, the one I'd inherited from my grandmother, the one I'd spent weekends renovating, installing new floors and painting every room to make it perfect for us. The house where I'd carried Jade over the threshold 15 years ago, believing we'd grow old together within those walls. I pulled out my phone and started recording, my hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. These two witches were planning my destruction like they were discussing the weather. "When will you tell him?" Janet asked. "After the holidays. Let him enjoy one last Christmas thinking he's got a family." Jade's voice was pure poison now. "Conrad and I have it all worked out. He's already talked to his lawyer about the cleanest way to handle everything." I'd heard enough. My whole marriage, my whole life, was apparently nothing more than a business transaction to be liquidated at the most convenient moment. 15 years of working overtime to pay for Janet's medical bills, Jade's shopping sprees, and family vacations that I couldn't afford, all of it meant nothing. I backed away from the kitchen door, my mind racing. The smart thing would be to confront them immediately, to storm in there and demand answers. But something cold and calculating was taking root in my chest, something that whispered about patience and planning. Instead, I walked quietly to the front door and stepped outside. Parked in the driveway, gleaming like a blue metallic middle finger, was Conrad's BMW. The car he was so proud of, the one he'd spent 20 minutes describing to me at the last office party while I smiled and nodded and pretended to care. I glanced around. The neighborhood was quiet, everyone inside preparing their own family disasters. From my pocket, I pulled out my multi-tool, the one I always carried for work emergencies. Amazing how useful a good tool could be. The lug nuts on his front passenger wheel were expensive, probably imported from Germany like everything else in Conrad's life. They were also slightly loose when I finished with them, not enough to cause an immediate problem, but enough to make his next drive very interesting. For good measure, I used my pocket knife to create a slow leak in his rear tire. Nothing dramatic, just a tiny puncture that would leave him stranded somewhere inconvenient. Then I walked back into the house, grabbed a piece of Janet's fancy stationery from the hall table, and wrote a note. "Jade and Conrad, congratulations on the pregnancy. I'm sure you'll be very happy together in that Harbor View condo. Don't worry about me. I'll be just fine. By the way, you might want to review the prenup more carefully. Turns out I'm not as stupid as you thought. Happy Thanksgiving. Miles P.S. Oh, Conrad, you might want to check your car. I left the note on the kitchen counter where they'd be sure to find it, then walked out the front door. My phone was already buzzing with missed calls by the time I reached my truck, but I didn't answer. Let them panic. Let them wonder exactly how much I'd heard and what I planned to do about it. As I drove away, I could see Janet's front window curtains twitching. Soon they'd find the note, and then the real fun would begin. The rusty anchor wasn't much to look at. A dive bar on the wrong side of town with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played country music from the 80s. But the apartment upstairs was cheap, furnished, and available immediately. Most importantly, it was mine. You sure about this place? Asked Danny Morrison, the bar's owner, as he handed me the keys. Danny was a former Marine who'd bought the place with his disability benefits and turned it into a haven for other guys who'd been chewed up and spit out by life. It ain't exactly the Ritz. It's perfect, I said, looking around the small studio apartment. A bed, a kitchenette, a table, and a chair. Everything a man needed to plot his revenge. It had been 3 days since Thanksgiving. 3 days of nonstop phone calls, text messages, and increasingly desperate voicemails from Jade, Janet, and even my brother Ted. I'd ignored them all, using the time to move my important belongings out of the house and into a storage unit across town. The beauty of our prenup, which I'd finally read cover to cover, was that it worked both ways. While it protected some of Jade's assets, it also protected mine. The house, which I'd inherited before our marriage, remained solely in my name. The investment accounts I'd built up over 15 years of careful saving were untouchable. Jade had assumed I was too dumb to understand the legal language, but she'd forgotten that I'd spent 4 years in business school before settling into logistics work. My phone buzzed again. Janet, for the 15th time today. I let it go to voicemail, then played back her message on speaker while I unpacked my clothes. Miles, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Jade is beside herself with worry. She says you won't return her calls, and now she can't get into the house? The locks have been changed. This is her home too, Miles. You can't just lock her out like some kind of criminal. Call me back immediately. I laughed out loud. Jade was beside herself with worry. Not about hurting me or destroying our marriage, but about being locked out of the house she'd planned to abandon anyway. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I'd changed the locks that morning, along with the garage door codes and the security system. Perfectly legal, since the house was solely in my name. I'd also canceled the joint credit cards and moved our joint savings into an account that required both signatures for withdrawals. Another little surprise for my cheating wife. The next voicemail was from Ted, my older brother, and a man who'd never met a bad business decision he didn't love. Miles, what the hell are you doing? Janet called me crying, said you've lost your mind. Jade's staying at her mother's place, terrified. Look, I know marriage is tough, but you can't just disappear like this. Call me back, and let's talk this through like adults. Ted, the voice of reason. The same Ted who'd borrowed $12,000 from me 2 years ago to invest in a pyramid scheme selling essential oils. The same Ted who'd never paid me back and acted like I was the asshole for bringing it up. I was starting to see a pattern in my family relationships. The last voicemail was from Jade herself, and her tone had shifted from worried to angry. Miles, I don't know what game you're playing, but it needs to stop. I came by the house today and couldn't get in. My own house, Miles. The neighbors are starting to talk. Mrs. Peterson asked me why I was trying to break into my own home. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? And what's this nonsense about a prenup? You're not making any sense. Call me back right now, or I'm calling my lawyer. Her lawyer. The same one who'd drawn up our prenup. This was going to be interesting. I walked downstairs to the bar, where Danny was setting up for the evening crowd. The rusty anchor attracted a specific clientele, blue-collar guys, divorced men, and others who'd been kicked around by life but weren't ready to give up entirely. It felt like home. Beer? Danny asked, already reaching for a bottle. Thanks. I settled onto a bar stool and took a long drink. Danny, you ever been married? Twice. He grinned. First wife left me for my best friend. Second wife left me for my car. Your car? Repo man. She'd been hiding credit card debt for 3 years. Danny shrugged. Women are like hand grenades, Miles. Beautiful to look at, but handle them wrong and they'll blow up your whole world. Wise words. I raised my beer in a toast. Here's to blown up worlds. Here's to building better ones. We drank in comfortable silence for a while. The bar was starting to fill up with the after-work crowd. Construction workers, factory guys, and other men who understood that sometimes life hit you in the face and all you could do was hit back. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. Miles, this is Conrad Miller. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Jade is very upset, and I'd like to clear the air. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow morning? I'm sure we can work this out like civilized adults. Civilized adults. The man who'd been screwing my wife wanted to discuss civilization. I showed the text to Danny, who read it and whistled low. This the guy? That's him, Dr. Conrad Miller, DDS. Drives a BMW, wears expensive suits, and apparently makes babies with other men's wives. What are you going to do? I thought about it for a moment, then typed back, Conrad, I'd be happy to meet. How about tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Sunrise Diner on Oak Street? Looking forward to our civilized discussion. I hit send and smiled. The Sunrise Diner was the busiest breakfast spot in town, and always packed with locals who loved their gossip almost as much as their coffee. If Conrad wanted to clear the air, we'd do it where everyone could hear. You're enjoying this, Danny observed. You know what? I am. I finished my beer and ordered another. For 15 years, I've been the good guy, the provider, the peacekeeper, the one who always compromised. I worked overtime to pay for things we couldn't afford, smiled through family gatherings where I was treated like garbage, and never complained when Jade spent money we didn't have on things we didn't need. And now? Now I'm done being the good guy. I raised my bottle again. Here's to being the villain for a change. The next morning, I arrived at the Sunrise Diner 15 minutes early and claimed a table right in the center of the dining room. The breakfast crowd was in full swing. Contractors, retirees, and local business owners who came here every morning to solve the world's problems over coffee and eggs. Conrad walked in at exactly 10 o'clock, looking like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. Expensive suit, perfect hair, and a smile that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He spotted me immediately and walked over with his hand extended. Miles, thanks for meeting me. I really appreciate this. Conrad. I didn't stand up or shake his hand. Have a seat. Coffee's good here. He sat down, looking slightly uncomfortable. The waitress, Betty, came over with a coffee pot. Betty had worked at the Sunrise for 20 years and knew everyone in town. She also had the biggest mouth in 3 counties. Morning, Miles. You want your usual? Just coffee today, Betty. Thanks. She poured for both of us, eyeing Conrad with obvious curiosity. You're new? I'm Betty. Conrad Miller, he said, flashing that expensive smile. Nice to meet you. Miller, you're the dentist, right? Got that fancy practice over on Elm Street? That's right. Betty nodded slowly, filing away information for later distribution. Well, any friend of Miles here is welcome. He's good people. After she left, Conrad leaned forward with a serious expression. Miles, I want you to know that whatever you think is happening, you're wrong. Jade is a wonderful woman and a valued employee, but there's nothing inappropriate between us. I sipped my coffee and studied his face. He was good. I had to give him that. Sincere expression, steady eye contact, just the right amount of concern in his voice. If I hadn't heard Jade's confession with my own ears, I might have believed him. Really? Nothing inappropriate? Absolutely nothing. I think there may have been some miscommunication, perhaps some gossip around the office that got blown out of proportion. You know how these things can snowball. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos until I found the one I wanted. That's interesting, Conrad, because I have this picture of Jade's text messages from Thanksgiving morning. I turned the phone so he could see the screen. His face went pale as he read Jade's text to someone labeled C. Told Mom about the baby. Miles will be gone soon. You promised me the condo. Conrad's composure cracked like ice on a warm day. Where did you get this? From my wife's phone. Amazing what people leave lying around when they think they're safe. I put the phone away and leaned back in my chair. So, Conrad, want to try that again? The part about nothing inappropriate? The diner had gone quiet around us. Not obviously quiet, but that subtle hush that happens when people sense drama and start paying attention while pretending not to. Conrad looked around nervously, then leaned forward and lowered his voice. Look, Miles, it's not what you think. Jade and I, we care about each other, yes. But we never meant for it to happen this way. Which way did you mean for it to happen? We were going to tell you, after the holidays. We wanted to handle this maturely without hurting anyone unnecessarily. I almost laughed out loud. Maturely? You've been screwing my wife and got her pregnant, and you call that mature? Several heads turned in our direction. Conrad's face was bright red now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Please, keep your voice down, he whispered. Why? Embarrassed? I raised my voice just enough to carry to the nearby tables. You weren't embarrassed when you were making plans to move my wife into your downtown condo. You weren't embarrassed when you were discussing how much better you could provide for her baby than I could. Conrad stood up abruptly, throwing a $10 bill on the table. This isn't the place for this conversation. Sit down, Conrad. My voice was steel now. You wanted to clear the air like civilized adults. Let's clear it. He remained standing, looking trapped. Betty appeared at our table with the coffee pot, her eyes bright with curiosity. Everything okay here, boys? Fine, Betty, I said calmly. Conrad here was just telling me about his plans to provide for my wife's baby. Isn't that nice of him? Betty's eyes went wide. The coffee pot trembled slightly in her hands. By noon, everyone in town would know that Dr. Conrad Miller was having an affair with Miles Grafton's wife. Conrad threw down another 10 and practically ran for the door. I finished my coffee slowly, nodding to the other customers who were staring openly now. When I finally stood to leave, Betty grabbed my arm. Miles, honey, I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do... Thanks, Betty. You've done more than enough. I walked out of the diner with my head high, leaving behind the best gossip the Sunrise had seen in years. By evening, the story would be all over town, growing and evolving with each telling. Phase 1 of my revenge was complete. The beauty of small-town gossip is its speed and efficiency. By the time I got back to my apartment above the Rusty Anchor, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from people I hadn't spoken to in months. Word of the diner confrontation had spread like wildfire, and everyone wanted the details. I ignored most of the calls, but answered when I saw my friend Rick's name on the screen. Rick worked at the hardware store and had been my bowling partner for the past 5 years. Jesus Christ, Miles, is it true? About Jade and Dr. Miller? Which part? All of it. Betty's been calling everyone she knows. She says Jade's pregnant with his kid, and they're planning to move in together. I sank into my chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. It's true, Rick. Man, I'm sorry. That's really messed up. There was a pause. You okay? You need anything? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. You sure? Because if you want to come over, Linda's making her famous chili tonight. You shouldn't be alone right now. Rick and Linda Morrison, no relation to Danny from the bar, had been our friends for years. They'd hosted barbecues and game nights, and Linda had always made a point of including Jade in her book club and women's groups, even though Jade usually complained about their boring suburban lives afterward. Thanks, but I'm good. Actually, I'm curious about something. How long have people known about Jade and Conrad? Another pause. Miles? Come on, Rick. We've been friends for 5 years. How long? There's been talk for maybe 6 months. Nothing definite, just... You know how it is. People notice things. The way they looked at each other at the office Christmas party. How she always had to work late on the same nights he did. That kind of thing. 6 months. 6 months of being the fool who didn't see what everyone else had figured out. 6 months of coming home to a wife who was planning my replacement while I paid the bills and played the devoted husband. Why didn't anyone tell me? What were we supposed to say? Hey, Miles, we think your wife might be cheating, but we're not sure. You would have asked for proof, and we didn't have any. Besides, people mind their own business around here. Except they didn't, really. They watched and whispered and made assumptions, but they didn't warn the guy who was being made a fool of. They saved their gossip for after the explosion, when it was safe to pick sides and offer sympathy. I get it, I said, though I really didn't. Thanks for being honest. Miles, for what it's worth, most people think you're handling this pretty well. Standing up to Miller like that took guts. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Then I opened Facebook and started typing, well, this has been an interesting week. For those who haven't heard, my wife Jade informed me, indirectly, that she's pregnant with her boss's baby and planning to move in with him. Apparently, I'm not good enough to provide for a child, despite 15 years of marriage and supporting her family through various financial crises. The good news is that our prenup protects my assets, so I'll be just fine. The bad news is that I apparently married someone who thinks marriage is a business transaction to be upgraded when a better offer comes along. Lesson learned. I stared at the post for 10 minutes before hitting publish. Within minutes, the comments started pouring in. OMG, Miles. I'm so sorry. What a snake. You deserve better. Hang in there, buddy. You're better off without her. I never liked her anyway. Too stuck up? But mixed in with the sympathy were other comments that made me freeze. There are always two sides to every story. Maybe you should work this out privately instead of airing your dirty laundry. This is really none of our business. The last comment was from Linda Morrison, Rick's wife. The same Linda who'd invited me to dinner an hour ago was now publicly suggesting I should keep my mouth shut about my wife's betrayal. I was starting to understand something about friendship and loyalty. When the chips were down, most people chose the safest, most comfortable position. They didn't want to get involved, didn't want to take sides, didn't want to deal with messy emotions or complicated situations. My phone rang. Jade. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed before I could even say hello. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My phone hasn't stopped ringing. People are calling me a whore. Miles, a whore." "Are you?" I asked calmly. "How dare you? How dare you humiliate me like this? And that stunt you pulled at the diner? Conrad is furious. His patients are canceling appointments. His staff is gossiping about him. You're destroying his reputation." "Good. Good? Good? Miles, you need to fix this right now. Post something on Facebook explaining that this was all a misunderstanding. Tell people we're working things out." I almost laughed. "Are we working things out, Jade? Are you planning to stop sleeping with Conrad? Are you going to move back into our house and pretend to be a faithful wife?" Silence. "I didn't think so. This isn't over, Miles. You can't just destroy people's lives because you're hurt. Watch me." I hung up and immediately received a text from Ted. "Call me now. We need to talk." Instead of calling, I drove to Ted's house. My brother lived in a modest ranch home in the suburbs, the kind of place that looked successful from the outside but was probably mortgaged to the hilt. Ted had always lived beyond his means, always chasing the next big opportunity that would make him rich. His wife Karen answered the door with a strained smile. "Miles, hi. Ted's waiting for you in the den." Ted was pacing back and forth when I walked in, his face red with anger. "What the hell are you doing, Miles? Mom called me crying. She heard about your Facebook post from her neighbor. Our family's business is all over town now." "Our family's business?" "Yes, our family. When you act like a lunatic, it reflects on all of us. Karen's friends are asking her questions she can't answer. My business partners are wondering if I'm as unstable as my brother." I sat down in Ted's recliner without being invited. "Tell me something, Ted. How long have you known about Jade and Conrad?" His face went even redder. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Come on. You've been having lunch with Janet every month for the past year. She pays, doesn't she? Picks up the check every time. What does she talk about during those lunches?" Ted stopped pacing. "She's concerned about you and Jade. She thinks you're not ambitious enough, that you're holding Jade back. And you agree with her?" "I think you could do better, yeah. You're smart, Miles. You could have your own business, make real money. Instead, you're content to work for someone else and live in that little house like you're afraid to take risks." "That little house is paid off, Ted. No mortgage, no debt. How's your mortgage situation these days?" His jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "But my marriage is your business. My wife's affair is your business." "She's not having an affair. Janet says it's just gossip. Rumors started by jealous people at the dental office." I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made at Thanksgiving. Jade's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "I'm pregnant, Mom. With Conrad's baby." Ted's face went white. He sank into a chair, staring at the phone like it was a snake. "Janet's been paying for your lunches, so you'd spy on me," I continued. "She wanted to know about my finances, my assets, my plans. She was gathering intelligence for Jade's divorce strategy." "That's not... I wasn't spying. She was just concerned." "And the $12,000 you borrowed from me 2 years ago, the money you've never paid back, did Janet help you with that too?" Ted looked like he was going to be sick. "Miles, you don't understand. Things have been tight. Karen lost her job, and the house payment..." "Save it." I stood up. "You sold me out for lunch money and gossip sessions with my mother-in-law. You knew Jade was planning to leave me, and you said nothing." "I didn't know about the affair." "But you knew she was unhappy. You knew Janet was encouraging her to find someone with more money. You knew they were planning something, and you kept your mouth shut because it was easier than being loyal to your own brother." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "By the way, Ted, that Facebook post was just the beginning. If you think I'm done airing the family's dirty laundry, you're wrong. I'm just getting started." That night, I posted again. Update on my situation. Apparently, some people think I should handle my wife's betrayal privately and not embarrass anyone. These are the same people who've been gossiping about the affair for months, but never bothered to tell me. Funny how everyone becomes concerned about privacy after the truth comes out. For the record, I'm not embarrassed. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't break any vows. I'm the victim here, not the villain, and I refuse to be quiet about it to protect people who didn't protect me. The comments on this post were more divided. Some people supported me, but others were clearly getting uncomfortable with my public campaign. Linda Morrison commented again. "Miles, I understand you're hurt, but this isn't healthy. You should talk to someone." I replied. "Linda, I am talking to someone. I'm talking to everyone. Thanks for your concern." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Dr. Miller. Your behavior is harassment. If you continue to defame me publicly, I'll have no choice but to involve my attorney." I screenshot the text and posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Apparently, telling the truth about someone's actions is now considered defamation." Interesting legal theory. Within an hour, I had 50 new comments and 20 private messages. The town was choosing sides, and battle lines were being drawn. Some people thought I was justified. Others thought I was going too far, but I was just getting warmed up. The next few days brought a steady stream of developments. Jade had moved in with her mother permanently, unable to afford her own place now that I'd cut off her access to our joint accounts. Conrad's dental practice was hemorrhaging patients as word of the affair spread through town, and my brother Ted had apparently borrowed money from 3 different family members, using me as a reference without my knowledge. I was learning that crisis had a way of revealing people's true character, and I didn't like what I was seeing. The breaking point came on Saturday night at Murphy's Tavern, the sports bar where my old friend group usually gathered to watch games and complain about their lives. I hadn't been there since Thanksgiving, but I decided it was time to face the music. The moment I walked in, the conversation at our usual table stopped. 5 guys I'd known for years, Rick Morrison, Dave Kowalski, Jim Patterson, Mark Stevens, and Tony Ricci, all stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Miles," Rick said carefully, "didn't expect to see you here." "Why not? It's Saturday night. Game's on." I pulled up a chair and sat down uninvited. "What's everyone drinking?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Dave cleared his throat. "Look, Miles, we heard about what's been going on. That's rough, man. Really rough." "Thanks. But maybe you should, take a break from the social media stuff. People are starting to talk." "People have been talking for months, Dave. The only difference is now they're talking about the truth instead of rumors." Jim leaned forward. "Come on, Miles. You're making everyone uncomfortable. This should be between you and Jade, not the whole damn town." "Should it?" I signaled the bartender for a beer. "Tell me something, Jim. How long have you known about the affair?" Jim's face reddened. "I don't know anything about any affair." "Really? Because your wife works at the medical center next door to Conrad's dental office. She's friends with his receptionist. You're telling me she never mentioned anything?" "Even if she did, it wasn't my place to get involved." "But it's your place to tell me how to handle it now that it's public?" Mark jumped in. "We're just saying you're going about this the wrong way. You're embarrassing yourself, man. People are starting to think you've lost it." "Which people?" "Everyone. The whole town's talking about how you've gone off the deep end. Posting on Facebook like some kind of crazy person, confronting Conrad in public, changing the locks on your wife. My cheating wife. Whatever. The point is, you're making yourself look bad. You're the one who's going to come out of this looking like the villain." I took a long drink of my beer and studied their faces. These were men I'd considered friends for years. We'd watched games together, gone to each other's barbecues, helped each other move. But now, when I needed support, they were more concerned about their own comfort than my betrayal. "So, what would you have me do?" I asked. "Be the bigger man," Tony said. "Take the high road. Don't give people more ammunition to use against you." "The high road?" I nodded slowly. "Like staying quiet while my wife plans to leave me for another man? Like pretending everything's fine while she's pregnant with someone else's baby? Like protecting the reputation of the man who's been screwing my wife in his office after hours?" "Jesus, Miles," Rick muttered. "Keep your voice down." "Why? Afraid someone might hear the truth?" Dave stood up abruptly. "I can't do this. Miles, I'm sorry about what happened to you. I really am. But you're not the same guy anymore. You're angry and bitter, and frankly, you're scaring people." "Good. Maybe people should be scared. Maybe they should think twice before they betray their friends and family." "We didn't betray you," Jim protested. "Didn't you? You knew what was happening and said nothing. You watched me make a fool of myself for months, bringing Jade to parties and introducing her to your wives, while you all whispered behind my back about her affair. How is that not betrayal?" Mark slammed his hand on the table. "Because it wasn't our responsibility. Your marriage isn't our problem." "But my reaction to my marriage is your problem. My Facebook posts are your problem. My public confrontations are your problem?" "Yes, because they affect us too. Our wives are getting dragged into this drama. People are asking us to take sides. You're forcing everyone to choose between you and Jade, and frankly, some of us don't want to choose." The truth was finally coming out. They didn't want to choose sides because choosing my side meant acknowledging that their own wives might be capable of the same betrayal. It meant facing the uncomfortable reality that marriage vows didn't mean much when a better offer came along. Tony tried a different approach. Look, Miles, we get that you're hurt, but revenge isn't the answer. You need to move on, find someone new, start over. Move on? Just like that? Yeah, just like that. Jade made her choice. Now you need to make yours. You can either be bitter and angry for the rest of your life, or you can let it go and find happiness somewhere else. I finished my beer and stood up. You know what, Tony? You're right. I do need to make a choice. I looked around the table at 5 men I'd considered friends. I choose not to pretend this is okay. I choose not to protect people who didn't protect me. I choose not to take the high road when the low road is more honest. Miles, come on, Rick said. Don't do this. Don't throw away 15 years of friendship over this. I'm not throwing it away, Rick. You are. All of you are. The minute you decided that my wife's feelings were more important than my friendship, you made your choice. I pulled out my wallet and threw a 20 on the table. This round's on me. Consider it a farewell gift. As I walked toward the door, I heard Dave mutter, "Good riddance. The guy's completely lost it." I turned around and walked back to the table. The bar had gone quiet, everyone watching the drama unfold. You think I've lost it, Dave? Yeah, I do. Interesting, because I think I've finally found it. For 15 years, I've been the nice guy. The one who keeps his mouth shut, who doesn't make waves, who protects everyone else's feelings at the expense of his own. And where did it get me? A cheating wife, fake friends, and a family that sold me out for lunch money. I looked around the bar, making eye contact with everyone who was staring. So, yeah, maybe I have lost it. Maybe I've lost the part of me that was willing to be everyone's doormat. Maybe I've lost the part that cared more about keeping the peace than telling the truth. And you know what? I'm glad it's gone. I walked out of Murphy's Tavern knowing I'd never be back. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of conversation as everyone started talking at once about what they'd just witnessed. My phone was buzzing before I reached my truck. Text messages from the guys at the table, trying to smooth things over now that they realized how bad they'd looked in public. Miles, you're right to be angry. We should have handled this better. Don't let this ruin our friendship. We can work through this. Maybe we should all sit down and talk when you've had time to cool off. I deleted the messages without responding. They were only reaching out because I'd embarrassed them in front of the whole bar, not because they actually cared about our friendship. When I got back to my apartment, I found a surprise waiting for me. Janet was sitting in her car in the parking lot crying. I almost kept walking, but something about the sight of my mother-in-law sobbing in a beat-up Honda Civic made me stop. I walked over and tapped on her window. She rolled it down, her makeup streaked with tears. Miles, thank God. I've been waiting for hours. What do you want, Janet? I want to apologize. For everything. For not telling you about Conrad, for encouraging Jade to think she deserved better, for using Ted to get information about your finances. So she was finally admitting it. Why now? Because Jade's pregnant, and Conrad isn't handling it well. He's talking about leaving town, starting over somewhere else. He says the gossip has ruined his reputation here, and he can't rebuild his practice with everyone knowing about the affair. And if he leaves, Jade will be a single mother with no job and no support. She'll lose everything, Miles. The baby, her future, everything. I stared at Janet's tear-streaked face and felt something cold settle in my chest. That's not my problem anymore. But it is. You could fix this. You could post something on Facebook saying you were wrong, that you misunderstood what you heard. You could give Conrad a chance to rebuild his reputation. I could lie to protect the people who betrayed me? You could be the bigger person. You could show mercy. The way you showed me mercy when you were pumping my brother for information about my assets. The way Jade showed me mercy when she was planning to leave me for a richer man. The way Conrad showed me mercy when he was screwing my wife in his dental office. Janet's crying intensified. Please, Miles, I'm begging you, don't let your anger destroy an innocent baby's future. The baby's future was destroyed the moment its parents decided to build it on lies and betrayal. That's not my fault, Janet. That's theirs. I walked away, leaving her crying in the parking lot. But as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I realized something important. Janet's visit meant they were desperate. Conrad was planning to run, which meant my campaign was working better than I'd hoped. It was time for the final phase of my revenge. Conrad's desperation became apparent over the next few days. His dental office was nearly empty, with patients canceling appointments and staff calling in sick. The local newspaper had picked up the story, running a small item about professional misconduct allegations that didn't name names but didn't need to. In a town this size, everyone knew exactly who they were talking about. I was sitting in the Rusty Anchor on Wednesday evening, enjoying a beer and the satisfaction of a plan coming together, when Danny slid a piece of paper across the bar. This came for you about an hour ago. It was a legal document, a cease and desist letter from Conrad's attorney, demanding that I stop defaming his client and threatening a lawsuit if I continued my harassment campaign. Harassment campaign, I read aloud. That's what they're calling the truth now. Danny leaned against the bar. You worried? Not even a little. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Every word I've said about Conrad and Jade is provably true. What about your brother? I heard he's been making noise around town. That was news to me. What kind of noise? Telling people you've always been unstable, that you're having some kind of breakdown. He's been making the rounds, talking to anyone who'll listen about how worried he is about your mental state. I wasn't surprised. Ted was trying to save face by painting me as the crazy one. It was a predictable move from a predictable man. Danny, you still got that karaoke machine in the back room? Yeah, why? I'm thinking about throwing a party. The next morning, I created a Facebook event. Miles Grafton's truth-telling party, Saturday night at the Rusty Anchor. The description read, come celebrate honesty, loyalty, and the end of my marriage to a cheating wife. Drinks, music, and all the dirty details you've been waiting to hear. No fake friends allowed. Within hours, the event had over 100 responses. Some people were genuinely supportive, others were coming for the drama, and a few were probably planning to record everything for later gossip. I didn't care about their motivations, I only cared about having an audience for the final act. By Friday, the whole town was buzzing about the party. Jade called me in tears, begging me to cancel it. Conrad's lawyer sent another cease and desist letter. Ted showed up at the bar, demanding that I stop this madness before you destroy the whole family. The family destroyed itself, Ted. I'm just providing the commentary. You can't do this, Miles. You can't humiliate Jade in front of the entire town. Watch me. What about the baby? What about that innocent child? What about it? The baby will have two parents who chose to create it through lies and betrayal. That's their choice, not mine. Ted's face was desperate now. Janet's talking about leaving town. She can't handle the shame. And Mom's getting calls from her friends, asking about our family. You're destroying everyone, Miles. Good. Maybe they should have thought about that before they betrayed me. Saturday night arrived with a packed crowd at the Rusty Anchor. Danny had moved all the tables to create a makeshift stage area, and the karaoke machine was set up with a microphone. People were standing 3 deep at the bar, and the parking lot was full of cars. I recognized most of the faces, coworkers, neighbors, casual acquaintances, and a few genuine friends who'd stuck by me through the whole ordeal. But there were also people I didn't recognize, drawn by curiosity and the promise of small-town drama. At 9 o'clock, I took the microphone. Thanks for coming, everyone. I know this is unusual, but then again, this whole situation has been unusual. A few people laughed nervously. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that my wife of 15 years was pregnant with another man's baby and planning to leave me for someone who could provide better. Tonight, I want to share the whole story because I think people deserve to know the truth about the folks they trust with their teeth and their secrets. I started with the Thanksgiving confession, playing the recording I'd made of Jade and Janet's kitchen conversation. The room went completely silent as Jade's voice filled the space, talking about Conrad's baby and the Harborview condo. Then I told them about the prenup, about Janet's manipulation of Ted, about the months of planning that had gone into my replacement. I showed them screenshots of text messages, played voicemails, and laid out a timeline of betrayal that stretched back almost a year. But here's my favorite part, I said, pulling up a new recording on my phone. This is from yesterday morning, a phone call between my dear brother Ted and my soon-to-be ex-wife. Ted's voice came through the speakers, clear and unmistakable. Miles is completely losing it, Jade. I think we can use this. If we can prove he's mentally unstable, maybe we can get the prenup thrown out. Janet thinks we should call the police, report him as a danger to himself and others. The crowd murmured angrily. Ted was in the back of the room, his face white with shock and rage. So there you have it, I continued. My loving family, trying to have me committed so they can steal my assets. My cheating wife, pregnant with her boss's baby, and my brother, who sold me out for lunch money and gossip sessions. I looked directly at Ted. By the way, Ted, that phone call yesterday, I was recording it, just like I've been recording all our conversations since Thanksgiving. Amazing what people will say when they think they're safe. Ted pushed through the crowd toward the door, but people blocked his way, demanding explanations. Someone shouted, "How much did Janet pay you, Ted?" Another voice called out, "What kind of brother sells out his own family?" The crowd was getting worked up, feeding off the drama and righteous indignation. I could see phones recording everything, capturing Ted's humiliation for posterity. Now, I said, raising my voice to regain control, I want to address the people who've been telling me to take the high road, to be the bigger man, to handle this privately. Where were you when I needed support? Where were you when I was being betrayed by the people closest to me? I pointed to a table near the front where Rick and Linda Morrison were sitting with uncomfortable expressions. Rick, Linda, you've been my friends for 5 years. You knew about the affair for months. You said nothing. But now you're concerned about my mental health because I refuse to protect the people who hurt me. Linda stood up, her face red. This isn't fair, Miles. We were trying to stay out of it. But you didn't stay out of it, Linda. You chose a side. You chose Jade's side by keeping her secrets. You chose Conrad's side by staying silent about his affair. The only person you didn't choose was me. The crowd turned to stare at the Morrisons, and I could see the judgment in their eyes. Rick grabbed Linda's arm and pulled her toward the exit, but the damage was done. And let's talk about Dr. Conrad Miller, I continued, the pillar of the community who's been screwing his married receptionist in his office after hours. The successful businessman who promised my wife a condo and a better life, but who's now planning to skip town rather than face the consequences of his actions. I pulled out my phone and showed the crowd a screenshot of a text message. This is from Conrad to Jade, sent this morning. I can't do this anymore. The practice is ruined, and I'm not ready to be a father. I'm leaving for Phoenix on Monday. You're on your own. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "What a coward!" Another voice called out, "He's abandoning the baby?" That's right, I said. The man who is going to provide so much better for this child is running away the moment things get difficult, leaving my pregnant wife with no job, no money, and no support. I could see Jade in the back of the room now, tears streaming down her face. She'd tried to stay hidden, but someone had spotted her and word had spread through the crowd. "Jade," I called out, and the crowd turned to look at her. "Would you like to say anything? Maybe explain to everyone how this is all a big misunderstanding?" She shook her head and tried to leave, but people were blocking the exit, eager to hear from the other half of the scandal. "No? Nothing to say? That's disappointing, because I have so much more to share." I spent the next 20 minutes laying out every detail of the betrayal. The financial manipulation, the family conspiracy, the months of planning that had gone into my replacement. I showed them bank records proving that Janet had been paying Ted for information. I played recordings of conversations where Jade and her mother discussed my limitations and Conrad's potential. By the time I finished, the crowd was completely on my side. They were angry at Jade, disgusted with Conrad, and contemptuous of Ted and Janet. I'd successfully turned the entire town against the people who'd betrayed me. "So here's where we stand," I concluded. "My wife is pregnant with another man's baby, but that man is abandoning her. My brother sold me out for pocket change. My mother-in-law orchestrated a conspiracy to steal my assets, and my so-called friends knew about all of it but said nothing until I decided to fight back." I raised my beer in a toast. Here's to the truth. Here's to loyalty. And here's to the people who stand by their friends when it matters. The crowd cheered and raised their own drinks. Someone started chanting, "Miles, Miles, Miles," and others joined in. For the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. But the best part was still coming. As the crowd started to disperse around midnight, I noticed a man in an expensive suit talking quietly to several people near the bar. I recognized him as James Patterson, the owner of the largest dental practice in the county and Conrad's main competitor. He approached me as I was packing up the karaoke equipment. "Mr. Grafton, James Patterson, I wanted to thank you for tonight." "Thank me?" "Dr. Miller has been stealing my patients for years with his fancy marketing and his promises of personalized care. Tonight, you've shown everyone what kind of man he really is. I expect I'll be getting a lot of new patients in the coming weeks." He handed me his business card. "If you're ever looking for dental work, I'd be happy to take care of you. No charge, of course. It's the least I can do." As Patterson walked away, I realized that my revenge had created opportunities I hadn't even considered. Conrad's abandoned patients would need a new dentist. His staff would need new jobs. His reputation was destroyed, but that destruction was benefiting others. I was cleaning up the last of the party supplies when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You've destroyed everything. I hope you're happy." I knew it was from Jade, texting from someone else's phone since I'd blocked her number. I typed back, "I didn't destroy anything. I just revealed what was already destroyed. There's a difference." A few minutes later, another text arrived. "The baby is innocent in all this." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "You're right. The baby is innocent. Too bad its parents aren't. I turned off my phone and walked upstairs to my apartment. Tomorrow, the whole town would be talking about tonight's revelations. Conrad would probably be packing his bags, if he hadn't already left. Jade would be dealing with the reality of single motherhood and social ostracism. Ted would be explaining to his wife why he'd betrayed his own brother for money. And I would be free. Free from a marriage built on lies. Free from family members who'd sold me out. Free from friends who'd chosen comfort over loyalty. Free from the burden of being the nice guy who always got stepped on. I poured myself a drink and sat by the window, looking out at the town where I'd lived my entire adult life. A town that now knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of when pushed too far. For the first time in 15 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same window, watching the morning traffic on Main Street, when Danny knocked on my door. "You've got visitors," he said with a grin. Downstairs in the bar, Rick and Linda Morrison were waiting at a table, looking nervous and uncomfortable. I hadn't spoken to them since the party, though I'd heard through the grapevine that they'd been having marriage problems of their own. "Miles," Rick said as I approached, "thanks for seeing us." I sat down without offering to buy them drinks. "What do you want?" Linda leaned forward. "We want to apologize. For everything. For not telling you about Jade, for judging how you handled it, for not being better friends." "Okay." "That's it?" Rick asked. "Just okay?" "What do you want me to say, Rick? That I forgive you? That we can go back to being buddies and pretend none of this happened?" You were hoping I'd make this easy for you, that I'd absolve you of your guilt and let you feel better about yourselves." I shook my head. "Sorry, but that's not my job anymore." Linda started crying. "We miss you, Miles. We miss our friend. Your friend needed you 6 months ago. He needed you to tell him the truth, to support him when his world fell apart, to stand by him when everyone else was choosing sides. Where were you then?" "We were scared," Rick admitted. "We didn't know what to do." "You knew exactly what to do. You chose not to do it." I stood up to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I heard about your marriage problems, Rick. Linda's been spending a lot of time with that new guy from the bank. Thought you should know." Rick's face went white. Linda's tears stopped abruptly. "Now you know how it feels," I said, and walked away. The truth was, I had forgiven them, in a way. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and it didn't mean going back to the way things were. Some betrayals changed relationships permanently, no matter how sorry the betrayers were afterward. Conrad had indeed left town, disappearing one night without telling anyone where he was going. His dental practice had been sold to James Patterson for pennies on the dollar. Jade had given birth to a daughter 3 months ago and was living with her mother, working part-time at a grocery store and struggling to make ends meet. Ted had lost his house when his wife discovered the extent of his debts and left him. He'd moved in with our mother and was working at a gas station, a far cry from his dreams of business success. As for me, I'd started my own consulting business, helping small companies optimize their logistics and supply chains. The work was challenging and profitable, and I was my own boss for the first time in my life. I'd also started dating a woman named Sarah who worked at the courthouse. She was divorced too, with 2 teenage kids and no patience for games or lies. We were taking things slowly, building something real on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. The house, my grandmother's house, was still mine, though I'd renovated it completely. New floors, new paint, new memories to replace the old ones. It was truly mine now, unmarked by betrayal or false promises. Sometimes people asked me if I regretted how I'd handled everything, if I wished I'd taken the high road, been the bigger man, handled things privately. The answer was always no. I'd learned that there was a difference between being good and being weak, between being forgiving and being foolish, between keeping the peace and enabling betrayal. For too many years, I'd confused those things, and it had cost me dearly. Now I knew better. Now I knew that sometimes the only way to get respect was to demand it, and sometimes the only way to get justice was to take it yourself. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dinner tonight? The kids are at their dad's." I typed back, "Absolutely. My place or yours?" "Yours. I'll bring wine." I smiled and put the phone away. Life was good. Not perfect, but honest. Not easy, but real. And that was enough.